one. No. Okay, I need to start.
Good afternoon, Ms. Crichton. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
Right. Excellent. As you know, I'm shortly going to invite Mr. Duncan to ask you some questions. If at any time you want to take a break, just say so, and we can take that break.
Yeah.
I think you're prepared to take the oath. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can I ask you to raise your right hand and repeat these words after me? I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that I will tell the truth,
that I will tell the truth,
the whole truth,
and
nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, Ms. Crichton. Now, Mr. Duncan.
Thank you, my lord. Good afternoon, Ms. Crichton.
Good afternoon.
Can I begin just with some formal questions? And first of all, have you confirmed that you are Senga Crichton, that you live in Ayrshire, with the younger of your two sons, is that right?
Yes.
And your younger son, I think, is presently 16 years old?
Correct.
Yeah. And I think we know from your statement that he was diagnosed with cancer of the brain when he was 12, and that he spent some time in the Royal Hospital for Children in Glasgow and also the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. And I think that was between March and November 2018. Would that be about right?
Yes.
And as I've just indicated, you've provided us with a detailed statement, and I think you're happy that that forms part of your evidence, the Scottish Hospital inquiry. Is that right?
Yeah.
Now, can I just check that you have a copy of your statement nearby?
Yes, I have.
That's great. Now, if at any point you want to have a look at it to help you refresh your memory or clarify anything, just say so. Let's begin then. I wonder if you could maybe just start by telling us a bit about your son and what he was like before he became unwell.
Kieran was a young boy who was always up to mischief. We ended up getting a diagnosis of autism at the age of 10. He then got himself into mixed martial arts, anything to keep him busy. He was always competitive. And he's done really well at these things. And he was never no well, never. He always had that cheeky humour, kept everybody going. Hard work at times, but cheeky humour helped. And then October time, 2017, he just became a different young man, very quiet, no one to do anything, tired. But he'd also started the academy at the same time, so we just thought it might be anxiety due to his autism, going to high school.
Well, let's just start to go through that then. If you just pause a minute, I think Mr. Love is just alerting me to something. My lord, Mr. Love has alerted us to the fact that the live stream does not appear to have commenced.
Confirmation of that. So I think it's quite. Thank you, Mr. Love.
Looks like it's working now, my lord, according to Mr. Love at least. Thank you, my lord.
Thank you.
Ms Crichton, hopefully that is now finally all of our technical challenges behind us, and we'll move on. You were starting to tell us about Kieran becoming unwell, and I think you indicated it was late 2017 began
Yes.
to change. And were you indicating that at first you thought it might be something to do with starting high school?
Yeah, we thought he was just anxious.
Yeah.
Because he's on the autistic spectrum, we thought he was just anxious about a different environment.
Yeah, and I think we can see in your statement that that didn't improve, and I think you start to lose weight. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sore heads, lost weight, more days off than in, so stopped kind of eating as much as well.
Yeah. So if we move into the beginning of 2018, and if we just try and take the story up, really up until the point where he is admitted to the Royal Hospital for Children, I think we can see that were you backwards and forwards to the GP quite a bit to begin with?
From October right through to the January, we were back and forward, and he just we were always looking for the obvious to start with, but we're taking bloods, and eventually Kieran decided he wasn't going to drink either, and we were going to have a referral to paediatrics by this point because he was really, really painfully thin.
Yeah.
And that night, when I decided to go to Crosshouse Hospital in Ayrshire, University Hospital, he had stopped drinking as well. So I knew that without food, drink, already lost so much weight, I had to do something about it. So I went up to him.
Yeah. Now, I just pause there and just ask this question of everybody. Is everybody able to hear Miss Crichton sufficiently?
For me, she's a bit faint.
Is there anything, I don't know if there's anything you can do to, at your end, whether you can sit nearer to the laptop or anything like that? I wonder if at our end the AV room can put the volume up.
How's that?
You want to
Is that
speak?
better?
I think so.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah, and
Yes.
Thank you, Ms Crichton. I knew as soon as I said that was hopefully our technical challenges behind us that it wouldn't be, but there we are. I won't say it again.
That sounds.
So I think we got as far as, I think, a referral to Crosshouse initially.
Yeah, they were going to send us to Crosshouse Hospital because we're Ayrshire to start with. Yes.
Yeah, and I think do we see from your statement that you were pushing to get more tests done? Is that right?
Yeah, we went in there. They put him on a drip for a week. So he did perk up, and he ate a banana and toast in the full week. And on the Thursday, we went in the Saturday. On the Thursday, they wanted to send him home. And they thought he had something called parathyroid. There was high calcium in the blood. And I said, no, I'm not taking my son home until you give me a definite answer of what's wrong with him. I can't leave here because it took me all my time to get Kieran to actually go to the hospital. So that day, he done scans, and I was called back that night. They had found a mass in Kieran's brain.
Yeah.
Sending us to Glasgow.
Yeah, and just to help in terms of the timeline on all of this, I think we can see from your statement that we're now into February. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
And as you've said, so was Kieran transferred to Glasgow Crosshouse?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think we see from your statement that you recall that he went to the Children's Hospital and he was put into the clinical decision unit. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. And I think we can see that at that point you met one of the neurologists, and there was then a referral to do a MRI scan. Is that right?
Yes.
And can you recall what the outcome of that was?
The outcome of that was they had found something in his brain. I'd asked them to be upfront and honest, no sugarcoat it, just tell me what I was dealing with. And Dr. Campbell had told me that she had seen this type of mass before. She couldn't be 100% at this point until she went to operate, then we thought it was medulloblastoma, which had spread into his spine, his spinal fluid. So 5 tumours there.
Yeah. And are we right in understanding that they started him immediately on chemotherapy?
Yes.
Yeah. And Kieran underwent surgery shortly after that, is that right?
Yeah, the 2nd of March, Kieran went through an operation to remove the biggest tumour.
Yeah. I mean, how long did that operation last?
I think if I remember right, it was about 7.5 hours.
And where did he go after that?
He went into intensive care
Yeah.
for a couple of days.
Yeah. And then after intensive care, where did he go?
He went up, I think after that was, I think to check, was it 3?
Yeah.
Sorry, aye, it was 3.
Yeah, I think
Not
that,
3.
yeah, I think according to your statement, 5th
Yep.
of March, he went to
3.
Ward 3A in the Children's Hospital. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
And just to pick up on one point of detail in terms of the timeline, I think we can see from your statement that Kieran was fitted with a Hickman line on the 8th of March. Would that be about right?
Yes.
And that was still while he was in 3A. Would that be right?
Yes, still in 3A.
How was Kieran after his operation?
The first 2 days, the first day, he was kind of shouting out and that. He was a wee bit all over the place. He's scared. But after that, Kieran then became mute, unresponsive. And I lay there, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, we didn't know what was wrong. And I didn't find out till later on to actually done my own investigations on it. But we kind of done our best. He couldn't talk, he couldn't swallow, couldn't sit up. And I lay there.
Yeah.
So I came round to finding out that it can happen. I think it's about 25% of kids. I'm not 100% in that. But they can end up with posterior fossa syndrome.
Yeah.
And that's due to a tumour removal, which left them with a left side paralysis.
Yeah. So you were starting to see signs of that even at this point? Okay.
Yes.
Now, what I want to do is sort of pause your evidence on the sort of history of treatment, and we'll just sort of stay in Ward 3A for a bit. And what I would like to do is just get your impression of Ward 3A. How did it appear to you?
At first, I mean, I was just kind of, it was quite a lonely place. We were just kind of left there, quite dark. The rooms were quite dark. I didn't realise that at that point wasn't a ward that dealt with kids with cancer. I just thought this was the ward I should be in, and we were just, I just felt lonely up there and kind of left to go on with it. I mean, I just had my son had that operation and also left with posterior fossa syndrome. And I just...
And were you there with Kieran the whole time? By which I mean, were you in his room with him all the time?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you
At
stay?
the start, yeah.
Yeah. You stayed overnight.
Yes.
Where did you sleep?
And the Ward 3A was a pull down bed that was in the room.
Were you able to sleep when you were on that ward?
No, not very well.
Why was that?
It was quite noisy. It was quite noisy. And I did have issues, and I kind of voiced my opinion about the noise levels of night shifts and stuff. And I know there was going to be things that woke you up, the machines going off with Kieran being on so many machines. But on top of that, you had, people coming in as if it was daytime. Never get a good sleep.
When you say people, who are you referring to? You don't need to name
The
names.
nursing staff. Nursing staff.
Yeah. And did you voice your opinion to them about that?
Yes.
And how did that go down?
They said they would try and keep it down a bit. Yeah, they did.
Okay. Just to pick up on another point, were you, was it just you who was looking after Kieran, or you know, spending time with Kieran?
At that time,
At this
yes.
time, yeah.
People would maybe come up and visit, but
Yeah.
at that time I was kind of there all the time.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I want to ask you a wee bit about some of the facilities on that ward. I think one thing that you mentioned in your statement is that there was a parents' room. Is that right?
Yeah, but it was outside the ward in
Right.
3A. It was outside.
Okay. What was your impression of the parents' room for 3A?
I think I'm not saying it wasn't clean, because it probably was cleaned, but sometimes with a lot of people using it, anyone could use it because it was in the middle of a corridor, you know, around the corner from lifts. And when you went in, sometimes it was quite dirty, a lot of rubbish. People never cleaned up after themselves, and that was probably parents not cleaning up after themselves. So, and I was quite far away, and at that point with Kieran, I always wanted to be as quick as I could.
Mhm.
I'm not being able to be vocal. I was his voice, so quick as I could get in and back out.
Yeah. Now, just picking up on what you've just said then, what about communication on Ward 3A? Do you ever have any issues about communication with staff on Ward 3A?
When I have a wee look at my thing, I did.
Why
There's a
don't you have a look at paragraph 56, Ms. Crighton?
Yeah. Communication. First one, I did have issues with them kind of communicating with things, or things not getting done, but the biggest one was on the 15th of March. I was getting chemo. I was sitting with visitors who had been in, and then they left, and I had just all of a sudden thought, my son's not had his chemo. And I thought, is it just me? So I actually did phone my sister and I went, did I miss anyone coming into that room? And she said, no, I don't think so. I don't think anyone came into the room. And I went outside and I asked to speak to someone because my son hadn't had his chemo the time he should have. And they had said to me, oh, I'm sorry, it's higher grade staff who have the key for the drugs cabinet and they're in the changeover. Me being me, I said, well, I'm sorry, I think you better about time go into that changeover, stop the changeover and get that key and get my son his chemo. And it's okay if it's only a wee hour short or so. I went, it's now 2 hours. 2 hours. Now, I wonder to this day, what would have happened if I never remembered? Would they have remembered? What would have happened? And that still goes through my head.
Yeah. And were there any other issues that you recall? For example, I think in your statement you mentioned there was an issue to do with soiled clothing, I think pyjamas.
Yeah, they were always going on about infection control and everything else. And one of the days when I came in to the room, someone had changed Kieran and his pyjama bottoms were lying on the floor, soiled. And he was getting chemo, so usually you had to wear your rubber gloves and everything else to protect yourself. And they were lying on the floor. And when I questioned them on that, they told me, oh, it just happened. But I wasn't so sure about that. I couldn't tell because I wasn't there at the time.
Okay. And were these issues, the issues that you've just spoken about, were these issues that you raised with the staff at the time?
Yes,
And do you mean by that you expressed your displeasure about these things?
yeah,
I mean, did these discussions with the nursing staff, did they ever become heated at all?
Yeah, I would say so. They would say, I'll come back when you're calm. I mean, there's a fine line between assertiveness and aggressiveness, and they always took the latter, you know, and I kept saying, no, I'm just trying to tell you that you get changeovers and things, and there's the things happening here that should, like, to stop myself there. there's things that are getting passed on in changeovers that I thought they would be able to know what they were doing with my child, and sometimes things were getting forgot about, and you think to yourself, well, what's the point of changeover? So then, because I would say things like that to them, or question about the infection control, because I was saying, well, that's about infection control, but you just left it on the floor. What's the difference? I don't know whether they liked that being challenged that way. Was it being horrible? I was just bringing it to their attention, but they took it the wrong way.
Are you indicating to us, Ms. Crichton, that during these early weeks when you were in Ward 3, there was quite a lot of mention of infection control?
Yeah, they always would say, you know, everything has to be kept clean and tidy, and have protocols to follow, you know, and everything has to be just right because it's a hospital.
Yeah. Now, the next thing I wanted to ask you about in relation to Ward 3A was about the facilities for Kieran and for children on that ward. Were there any facilities Kieran was able to use while he was there?
Not really, because Kieran was still kind of just lying there, to be honest, at that point in time. You know, there wasn't really an awful lot happening.
Yeah, I think there was a playroom on the ward, but are you
Yeah.
indicating that wasn't something he was really able to use?
We didn't even have a wheelchair at that time,
Yeah.
or anything either.
Yeah. Okay, now I want to move forward a little bit in time. And I think we know that from about the 20th of March 2018, you were on Ward 2A. Is that right?
Yes.
So I want to just look at the period from then up until about May 2018. And I'll come on and look at other periods after that. Now, just thinking then about that initial sort of 6 weeks or so on Ward 2A, can you recall what treatment Kieran was having over that period?
Was his radiotherapy, getting that Monday to Friday at the Beatson. That was Monday to Friday mornings. Then he would come back. What?
Yeah. And how did he cope with this radiotherapy?
It kind of took a lot out of him, and he was quite tired, you know. So we would leave at 8 o'clock in the morning for his taxi, and then he would go to the Beatson and I'd come back about 12, half 12. And usually we come back and just go in his room and be very, very tired.
Now, a moment ago, you mentioned that Kieran on Ward 3 didn't have a wheelchair. How was Kieran's mobility at this stage?
When he was in 3A, we actually had to lift him, try and get him in a shower. Because the other way of getting him in the shower, wasn't he walking?
Yeah.
We tried that once and it was quite traumatic, and I thought, I'm not going to do that again. So we kind of reverted to bed baths and things.
Yeah. And by the time you were on Ward 2A, and by the time that you're doing these trips to the Beatson, was there any improvement in Kieran's mobility by then?
A wee bit, not much. He had a wee bit better balance. But
yeah. And am I right in understanding that he did get a wheelchair when he was on Ward 2A?
Yes.
Now, again, I would just like to get your impression of the ward. So I wonder if you can just maybe describe Ward 2A to us. And if you want the reference in your statement, Ms. Crichton, if that would help you, it's paragraph 24, I think, is the principal reference.
Yeah, it's 2A is Shahaleen ward, and when you walk in, it goes right round in a kind of half circle. There's a desk halfway along, and then up the very top you have, I think it's 4 rooms called the teen zone that are further back for older kids. It looked okay, quite bright. There's a playroom, and stickers and that up on the wall. Seemed okay, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Well, that's what I was about to ask you. Was it a nice place?
Yeah, I thought it was fine. Yep.
And that's the wards. Now I want to ask you some questions about Kieran's room. Was he in the same room all the time?
No, we were in, the first room we went into was a transplant room by mistake. I emptied all the stuff and then they told me to move. Trying to put him in a room behind the nurse's desk, but it was after his operation, his sensory issues went through the roof. So I asked if they could put him a bit further along. I knew they had to put him near because he needed quite a lot of care. So we put him in room, it was 6, the one at the back was that too. And we went in there. So we had a few room moves while we were in there.
And were any of the rooms that you were in noisy rooms?
They could be, yes.
Do you recall whether the staff did anything to help with that?
Yeah, we actually were given headphones for Kieran.
Yeah.
To help with to reduce the noise.
Yeah. Now I want to ask again about facilities on the ward. There was a playroom on ward, is that right?
Yeah.
Was Kieran able to use the playroom?
Nah, not really, no.
Yeah. What about play leaders? Were there play workers or play leaders came to the ward?
Yeah, they came down and kind of asked Kieran if there's anything they could do. Kieran was kind of giving board games and he was doing his wee courage beads, you know, the wee beads they get in cancer journey, colouring in stuff. And I mean, Kieran was nearly 13 by this time and wasn't allowed in the Teenage Cancer Trust at that point, teen zone, sorry. But they would bring things down, you know, to colour in and things like that.
Did he like that?
Yeah, he quite liked taking a colour things. He was doing the wee stones. One of the parents started the wee stone collection thing for painting the stones, so Kieran kind of done a wee bit of that as well.
Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned in your statement about facilities is a cinema. You say there was a cinema in the Schahalian unit, is that right?
Yeah,
Did Kieran get to go to the cinema?
I think in all that time, Kieran only went once or twice max, due to Kieran because his posterior fossa syndrome was kind of wobbly and couldn't sit still. So because of that, had to be put to sleep for his radiotherapy every day. And what the hospital staff said to me was, because he gets put to sleep every day, he's been under a general anaesthetic, he can't go, he's not allowed to go to the cinema. He kind of missed out a lot with that because, unfortunately, under general anaesthetic for radio.
Right. So it was only on days where he hadn't had the general anaesthetic that he got to go, is that right?
Yeah.
I think in your statement you mentioned, you certainly mentioned one occasion, I think you got to see Star Wars, is that right?
Yes, he did. That's his favourite.
Yeah. What about facilities for parents on the ward? What was there?
Well, there was a small kitchen with like coffee. That was a wee fridge. But Kieran was kind of funny with leaving his stuff in there because he didn't let me touch his stuff. So and I used it sometimes for myself, but sometimes we go missing sometimes. And Kieran, if I put in Kieran's in there, he wouldn't have touched it. Other people were in that room.
Was it something that you used a lot?
No, not really, to be honest.
Yeah. Was it something that you found useful?
It was good if you went down and somebody was in and you had somebody to talk to, because it can be a lonely place. And we were in source quite a lot, or the board was shut down, and the only people you can talk to is anybody walking into your room if they could, or a parent in the parents' room.
And did you find that was something that was helpful, being able to do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Was it always easy to get access to it or to be able to use it, or were there ever any difficulties in using that room?
That it was kind of, sometimes it could be busy and you just felt as if you were sitting, you know, and you just wouldn't. You kind of lay it there. Just felt maybe people talk about things and you just didn't want to do it, you know.
Yeah. And just thinking about what you'd said about the previous parents' room, was it clean?
Yeah, that one, yeah, it was clean. It was
Now, something that you've just touched upon a moment ago that I now want to ask you about, how often or how regularly was Kieran in isolation or in source?
quite a lot. Quite a lot, yeah. We were putting sauce quite a lot, which is, as you know, due to maybe sickness or loose stools or things like that. But I did explain to them at the time, Kieran, due to his autism, a lot of kids with autism do have a problem with their bowels, and that was normal, but they were always put on.
Yeah. Do you recall the ward, thinking about this period, do you recall the ward being closed to visitors at any point?
Yeah, we were in that room, and I remember the full ward getting shut down. I think it was nearly around about just before time, if I remember right. And they put the sign on the door. We weren't allowed visitors or in. Nobody was allowed in, nobody was allowed out.
I think you took a photo of the sign, is that right?
Yeah,
And we're going to have a look at it if the technology will permit that. Ms. Brodie, could we have a look at page 214 of bundle 5? Now, hopefully this will come up for you as well, Ms. Crichton, but presumably you're familiar with the picture anyway.
Okay.
That's the picture that went up on the door in Easter 2018, is that right?
Can you see it?
You can see, yeah.
Back. I'll check the back of my statement. Yes, that's it.
That's it.
Yes.
Thanks very much, Ms. Brodie. You could put that down. So, how long was that there for, as far as you can recall?
I think I would just be guessing maybe about 2 weeks.
Why did you
I think
take
it was
it?
about 2 weeks.
And did that mean there was no visitors over that period?
Yeah, I'd done a group chat thing so that I didn't have to message everybody individually. I had done a group chat thing. So I took a photo of that and I went, no visitors, this is what's happening. And I just sent it into the group.
Was there ever any explanation of why the sign went up?
They were trying to say they weren't sure where it was coming from to start with. I felt it was just a kind of, at one point you felt as if they were trying to blame parents for bringing it in, you know, and different things like that. That's the way I felt.
Can I stop you there when you're talking about it? What was it they were blaming you for, or what was it they were trying to explain?
I think they were trying to say that we were maybe bringing in bacterias or germs from outside into the ward. That's what it felt like.
I think at paragraph 31 of your statement, I think what you say is there was a concern about, is it unexplained infections on the ward?
Yeah.
And over this period, did Kieran still get to go to the Beatson for his radiotherapy?
Yes.
But apart from that, was there any coming and going out of the ward for you or for him?
No.
And were you in source for the whole of that period?
I think so, yeah, because you had to get so many they collected stools and urine. You had to wait until you got the results back and got clear before you could be put out.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's move forward a little bit in time, and I want to think about the next sort of period of time. If we go from May to September 2018, okay, and if I just try and start by getting an overview of the main things that happened, I think we can see from your statement that Kieran's radiotherapy concluded, I think, on the 16th of May. Is that
Yeah.
about right?
Uh-huh.
And was he discharged at that point to Click Sargent?
Marion House
Yeah.
facility.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were discharged there.
Yeah. Now, just pausing there at the mention of Marion House, had you stayed there at any point up until this point?
Yeah, what had happened was just with everything, I was kind of burning myself out, and I had got Ronald McDonald House, and then they managed to get me a room in Marion House and kind of said, you need to get yourself over there and get a straight sleep, get back over. So I was there. I can't remember the exact date, but
Yeah.
I was in Marion House before
Yeah.
that.
I think in your statement you say that when Kieran was on Ward 2A, you would be there from 7 a.m. until
About
10 at night, and then you would go to Marion House and get a good night's sleep and come back and do it all again. Is that right?
Can
you describe Marion House to us?
It's a lovely wee house, and it has your entrance going in, and you have maybe downstairs, upstairs, rooms, bottom, that 3 families share a kitchen and a living area. You also have a laundry room where there's washing facilities, that you have your own certain machine, you know, they tell us this is for this room and this is for this room. I think that's to do with kind of to make sure if there is any infections or anything, that's there for that reason. You have a back door. It is just like a house. It's just like your home.
Yeah. Is it a nice environment?
Yeah, it's lovely. Kieran absolutely loved being over there.
Yeah, well, that's what I was about to ask you. So thinking about May 2018, when Kieran gets to go and stay there, what did you do to pass the time when you were staying in Marion House?
Kieran actually would go about in the chair, you know, sometimes he's in the room like normal teenage boys on the Xbox. By this point, he was starting to use things again. Or he would be out the back door. Gran would come up, his dad would come up, spend time. It was a bit easier for people to come visit him, you know, instead of not being able to see him in the hospital.
Yeah, I mean, in your statement, it's paragraph 36, Ms. Crichton, you indicate that there were a number of activities during the day that there would be physio would be one of them. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I think you also mentioned that you would there would be some schoolwork. Is that right?
Yeah, we would go over there to the hospital, and the teachers, there's teachers over there, and because we couldn't get done the schooling.
Yeah, and am I right in understanding that you did a bit of cooking as well?
Yeah, Kieran done some cooking and made some smoothies in the adapted kitchen at the hospital as well.
And so how was Kieran doing over this period?
Yeah, he was doing a lot better.
Yeah, and he was. Am I right in understanding that he was still going back across to the Schahalian unit for his chemo? Is that right?
Yeah, he would. The reason I was in Marion House is because my house wasn't suitable, and I had to wait to get a suitable house. And that's the reason I continued up at Marion House.
Yeah.
So I was able to go back and forward to the hospital appointments.
And when you say suitable, does that mean suitable for a wheelchair?
Yes,
Yeah, and am I right in understanding, in fact, it wasn't until November that you managed to get a house that would be suitable for a wheelchair, is that right?
Well, we did leave Marion House in November. We got the house September, and we kind of
Right.
done everything to it, and then we left to go into it.
Yeah, you got the house in September and then adapted it, is that right?
Adapted afterwards, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's really helpful. Now, what I want to do is now just go back a bit and just look at one or two incidents along the way. We go back to July 2018. You recall an incident involving a window?
Yes,
You want to tell us a bit about that?
I was staying in Marion House, and me and Kieran left to come over to an appointment in the main hospital, and I think we were just past and in when the window, from the external window, came down crashing at the front of the adult hospital, smashed into bits.
How far away were you from where the window landed?
very good with distance, but the full length of that front, say about 100 metres.
Yeah. Was there, as far as you were able to see, was there anybody nearby where the window landed?
Yeah, there are people there all the time. There's people coming and go there all the time between walking for the children's hospital or coming out the adult hospital. Some people are just sitting in chairs outside there, you know. Some people are smoking, but, you know, it's quite a busy area.
Can you recall whether there was a commotion when this happened?
Yeah, I mean, I heard the commotion, but I just kind of, I was too busy getting in for my appointment.
Yeah. Now, I think we know, see from your statement, that Kieran was moved towards 6A in late September 2018. That would be right? Yeah. But there's an incident before then I would like to ask you about, an incident to do with Kieran's line. And do you recall one occasion when you went into Ward 2A noticing something about Kieran's line?
Yeah, when we were going in, it was this last round of chemo, that's how I remember. And there was pus line. And I did, I said to the nursing staff, you know, there's pus there. It's fine, keep an eye on it. And they put a wee kind of pad on it. What I took that to be is maybe like a poultice type thing. And they put it round it. It was very red as well. Say to them about it.
And were you, as far as you can recall, was this something that you'd noticed when you were in Marion House, or was it something you noticed when you got to Ward 2A?
I can't remember
But
if it was there or in there, but I did notice because it gets cleaned every week, you know, and I think it was there.
But you do recall pointing it out to nursing staff?
Yeah, yeah, I took a picture as well.
And what are you indicating that they did in response to that?
They cleaned it and they put it was like a wee donut, you know, the only way I can describe it is, see the wee things you get for corns on your toe, a wee circle pad, they put one of them on it, and I took that, I kind of, it's like an antibacterial thing, you know, that maybe draws the pus out, I think. I'm guessing here, that's what that was to do.
Were you concerned at all by this?
I was concerned when the first bit of chemo that went in, Kieran did say to me, Mum, that's nipping. I did tell them at that point that just said they keep an eye on it.
So just pausing there, was the cleaning of the line and the putting on the donut, that before or after Kieran was given his chemo on this occasion?
That was before.
So he then proceeds to get his chemo and he says it's nipping. And what happened after that?
He just kind of, he talked about that straight away.
Yeah, well, did you notice anything happening straight away after that, or did you notice anything happening after a little while?
After a little while, Kieran was kind of, became quite puffy, and he was, they call it Riger, you know, the shaking. That's happened to Kieran before in the last round of chemo, so it's just Rigering because he's treatment, and we'll get antibiotics and stuff into him and he'll be fine, but kept going on and on.
Was he back in Marion House when this started?
No, see, when Kieran went over for his chemo, his last round of chemo, he was in for a week, and then he would go back to Marion House. So this was the week he would be in the hospital.
Thank you. So he was on 2A rather than 2B at this point?
Yeah.
And if he starting to show signs of rigor, does that mean that he was running a temperature?
Yes, blood pressure was down, heart rate was up.
Now, just pausing there, going to ask you some more questions in a minute about how Kieran was. What was going on elsewhere on 2A at this point?
They were actually trying to move the ward over to 6A that day.
Was Kieran able to go at this point?
They came and told me that Kieran couldn't be moved until they could stabilise him. I think he was the last kid out, to be honest, in the ward.
How did that make you feel?
I was worried. I was actually more worried about Kieran that then than when they told me cancer, because they were then telling me it was septic showers he was having. I know that septicemia is quite dangerous, so I was starting to worry. And then the doctor had said, we can't take him to 6A, he's going straight to intensive care because he's very unwell.
Yeah, well, yeah. Now, I was going to ask you a bit about what it was they said causing this. Before we do that, are you indicating, if the doctor is saying that he had to go to intensive care, are you indicating that Kieran continued to deteriorate?
Yeah, and even when you ask Kieran about that now, Kieran cannot remember anything about that day.
I mean, how did you feel when you were told he's got to go to intensive care?
I was really, really worried.
But happily, he'd got better on intensive care and eventually, I think, was discharged to ward 6A in the adult hospital. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. Now, you said a moment ago that you were told it was something called a septic shower. Can you remember when you were told that? Was that while all of this was happening, or was it afterwards?
That was when there was a lot going on. There was a lot of people in the room, so much happening. I was just trying to keep up. I was actually more just kind of making sure that he was okay, because I did get anxious anyway. And I didn't know whether he was aware of what was happening round about him, so I just try to be there for him. But and then Dr. Murphy just walked in and took control of the full situation. Just said to them, that he touched up here and he went, did nobody do this? It was just as if that was it. After that, everything just kind of, everything just started happening. And there was him that said, he's having septic showers, he's very unwell, we need to take him to intensive care.
And when you indicate that Dr. Murphy touched Kieran with his 2 fingers towards the top of his neck, are you indicating that he was taking a pulse? Is that what you?
I don't know whether he was touching him here or not, but it was very, very, he was like, he really did take control and told everybody this is what's happening now.
Yeah, before Dr. Murphy arrived, how were the other doctors and nurses there appearing?
It was as they were, I think they were a wee bit concerned about Kieran, because we had the doctors from intensive care up as well, trying to see if they could move Kieran. You know, they were all having discussions with each other. But they were telling me, we're for intensive care unit, we're just here for a precaution. We need to get Kieran from here over when he's stabilised enough.
And you say that Kieran's not really got any recollection of any of this now. Were you able to see?
I did. I have asked him.
Yeah. Were you at the time? Was he aware of what was going on?
Well, the night before, when the rifling started, I actually had went in with him, lay in the bed and holding his hand, because he was scared. He's like, Mum, why is this not stopping? You know, so yeah. Fine. Sorry, but he's no recollection after that. I think it just because it got worse, he just didn't know what was happening. I don't think he can't remember.
Now, as you've said, happily, you okay to keep going?
Yeah, just keep going. We're all right.
Okay. Now, just sort of moving on from that event, but I still want to ask you another thing about it, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Looking back at that event, do you have any concerns about any aspect of it?
I just think, I don't know why it was left so long before they actually dealt with Kieran, when I had already highlighted that I thought there was an infection with yellow. I mean, it's a picture, it's really, really bad, and it's okay, it'll be fine, and just left, and then for him to, like 48 hours later, having to go into intensive care.
Yeah.
And why did they not see that coming? I just,
Did it have? You okay, Ms. Crichton?
yeah,
What I wanted to ask you also was, did it have any effect on the extent to which his chemotherapy continued?
Kieran couldn't receive his last bag of chemo because he wasn't well enough.
Do you have any concerns about that?
Yeah, I spoke to Dr. Murphy and I explained to her, a wee bit worried, but he walked me through it, and he said, you know, there's other stuff he's had will continue to work, and one bag shouldn't really make as big a difference as what you think. He says, just see how things go. But he says he's not well enough to receive it.
Now, did you have any, or do you now have any suspicions about how it was the infection came about?
Well, I had to actually stop using the water when there was concerns hearing from the media and other parents. I actually stopped using the water altogether. And I was using patient wipes, you know, the ones that's already got stuff in them for Kieran.
Yeah.
And I was using Marion House shower, so.
Those concerns, or rather those, were you aware by then of issues in the media and issues being discussed by parents? Is that what you're indicating?
Yes,
And can you say whether at this stage you had any concerns about whether there might be a link between what happened to Kieran and sort of concerns that you were either reading about or hearing about?
Yeah, I did say straight away that I felt that could be related to bacteria in the water because the lines are getting flushed. They get their chemo and then they're getting it flushed. So
How is it they flushed the line?
well, not 100% in this, but I thought they used bottles of sterile water. But when they're cleaning, a wee thing they clean, but I don't know what they wash it with beforehand. I think it might be wrong there.
And can you recall whether you raised your concern with any of the clinical staff?
I think I had words to say to a few, to be honest.
Well, do you want to have a, would you like to have a look at your statement? It's paragraphs 80 and 81.
Goodness.
You want to just take a moment, just have a read over it and indicate to me once you've done that.
Yep. Yeah, they're the ones here.
Yeah.
I was angry that day, and I think Dr. Murphy was in the room at the time, so he was the one that kind of was angry, and I was saying, "You've nearly killed my son because your bacteria in your water," and then it was one of the nurses as well, but he kind of walked out because he knew I was on a rant. There was no point talking to me, and the nurse was the same. Same.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was kind of really upset that day, and I was blaming them for nearly killing my son.
Thank you. Now, let's move on a wee bit in time. We know that, as you've already indicated, Kieran was discharged from intensive care to 6A And
Yeah.
I think we can see from your statement that that was on the 28th of September. I think he was not in 6A for a very long period of time. Nevertheless, I wonder if you could give us your impression of Ward 6A insofar as you can recall it.
In a basic, not very bright, long corridor. It just kind of went up and round as well. I didn't see many facilities for kids or anything in the short time I was in, but we weren't in that long, so
Mhm.
I was back out, you know, and the only time I went over was like for the day unit at the top.
Yeah. And can you recall whether Kieran was in source or in isolation when he was on 6A?
No.
Yeah, I think, are we right in understanding, according to your statement at least, it was about 48 hours that he was on Ward 6A, would that be right?
Yeah, and then we were discharged to Marion House.
And can you recall whether you had any discussions with the staff in advance of being discharged to Marion House?
Yeah, I was worried because, well, Kieran had just been in intensive care with us for the Rees line, etc. And I can't even remember who it was, but there's a few people there. But they said maybe it'd be safer not being in the hospital just now anyway.
And what did, well, let's take that in stages. Was that a doctor or a nurse that you had that conversation with, or indeed somebody else?
I think it was somebody. I think it was somebody else. I think
wasn't
there was a few people in there. There was a few people in the room at the time.
Okay. And you
There was
don't
a few
think,
people in and out of the room.
sorry, I keep speaking over you, I'll try to stop
That's okay.
doing that. And you don't think it was either a doctor or a nurse?
It could have been both. It could have been both at the time that was in that room.
Okay.
But
And you have a recollection of somebody saying what about this?
just because of everything that was going on, you know, unexplained infections, etc., they had said maybe that's a good thing the way things are at the moment, that you'd be safer.
And I think eventually, after you go to Marion House, you've already indicated eventually Kieran is discharged home, is that right?
We went to Marion House to September, and then we went home.
And then am I right in understanding that you go on to 3 monthly checkups at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, is that right?
Yeah.
And how did that go?
Yeah, no, okay. Yeah, that was fine.
Okay. And then just to maybe conclude the sort of history, I think Kieran was admitted again in August 2020 to have a shunt fitted, is that right?
Yeah.
And I think he then had another procedure in March of this year. Was that to help with his mobility?
Yeah, he got his leg straightened, brace put on the side to try and walk.
And has that helped?
Well, we're still in the early stages. He's a couple of steps, but a lot of physio needed. But
Maybe just I'll ask you this question at this point then. How is Kieran?
the cheeky humour's back. He's getting there. He's good and bad days. Some days he's fine, other days he's like more aware of how he's been left. But mostly good, as he's kind of use a lot of humour between the two. As we're like a comedy act. But he's a lovely wee boy. He is.
Okay, now I want to move on and just have you think about some particular issues that you raise in your statement about the period while you were in the hospital. And the first of these is to do with water. If we go back to the very beginning, when you were in Ward 3A, were both you and Kieran using water as normal on that ward?
Yes,
Does that mean you were drinking it and also washing in it?
Yep.
Do you recall whether on that ward you ever saw any filters on the taps?
I never know. I can't even recall them really there.
Can you recall on that ward whether you used the shower at all?
Yes, I did.
And can you recall whether Kieran used the shower at all, or whether you used the shower on him?
Yes.
Can you recall whether there was ever any issue with that?
Well, it was hard for Kieran to shower in there, but he was, because his sensory issues went through the roof, it was quite painful, the water hitting him.
Yeah.
So that's how we kind of left that.
And then if we move on to Ward 2A, did you see water filters on the taps there?
Yes, I did.
Can you say whether you saw them on the showers?
Yes.
Can you recall whether you saw them being fitted either to the taps or the showers at any point?
While I was in, there was already ones on. And while I was in, they came and put different ones on, a date on them.
And when you say they, were you able to see who was doing that?
It looked like outside contract. I don't think it was the hospital. I think it was an outside agency that was coming in to do this.
Did you have any discussions with any of those individuals?
Yeah, I'd asked them why they were changing. He says, I don't know, I'm just doing my job. And then I just kind of took the one off and put the other one on.
When you were in Ward 2A, did you ever see any signs or anything that said anything about the water?
Yeah, it just not to drink it, and also it was I think it says run 3 minutes or something before you shower as well. You're to run them.
And when you were on that ward, did you use the water for washing Kieran? Didn't.
Stopped.
When you say you stopped, does that mean you initially used it?
Yes,
Did you ever have any concerns about the water, or whether on Ward 3A or on Ward 2A?
We did, but it just kept getting told that it was fine and it's okay to use and stuff to start with. I mean, people were just saying it was okay. But the more we heard from outside and other parents that just kind of just thought, no, I can't chance this, you know.
Was it something that was discussed quite a bit among parents?
Yeah, but it wasn't overly talked about. It was just like if you were passing, if someone had come up with the water and you say, oh, that water, I don't know what's happening with that. But it wasn't the focal point at every conversation you had, you know.
But certainly, I mean, if we think about what you said a moment ago about the events of September 2018, you're indicating you certainly had an awareness from the parents and also from the media. Is that right?
Yeah.
When you were on Ward 6A, albeit you were only there for a fairly short period of time, were you aware of any issues to do with the water then?
Well, I just thought to myself, if it's in the water, it's full hospital. So I would have just done exactly the same what I'd done in 2A. I still wouldn't have water.
I think you indicate a recollection that at some stage there were portable sinks provided, is that right?
Yeah.
Can you remember which ward you were on when that happened?
I'm sure it was 2A we were in, and they gave us this wee sink, a bottle underneath, and I think you used your foot to pump the water through it, into, you know, like a kind of basin type thing to wash.
And just, you know, doing the best you can just now and thinking back about all three wards for that period of time, what explanation, if any, did you get from staff about the issues to do with the water?
Really none. We never really got much from them about the water. When we asked them, it was just, oh, it's fine, it's nothing to worry about, give away, but just don't use that until, just in case. Use the bottled water. You know, they were kind of probably playing it down a bit.
And then when you say just in case in your statement, you say paragraph 50, you mentioned them saying it was just a precaution. I think in relation to not using the water, is that right?
Yes.
Do you have any recollection of anybody offering any explanation for why there was a need for precaution as regards the use of the water?
Because of the unexplained infections.
And did anybody ever suggest an explanation for why that had come about in the first place?
No, nothing.
Still looking at paragraph 50, Ms Crichton, the comment that you make there about blaming the cleaners, what do you have in mind there?
See, the only thing I would say was I had the cleaners always come in and cleaned the rooms to a decent standard. I would say I never had any issues. They come in, they brushed, they emptied the bins, albeit different times, and cleaned the floor. The only thing I did have an issue with was we're using the same mop in every room. You know, they would walk along the corridor and they were using the same, it wasn't the individual mops. And I thought, so if there is a infection and it's in that room, then we're going to be in this room or the next room. You know, that was my only issue, but I never had any issues with the cleaners. They always come in and clean my room.
Yeah, but the paragraph in paragraph 50, you're indicating that somebody had an issue with the cleaners. And
oh yeah, sorry. When infection control, they're always coming to see you about different things, and they're saying, yeah, the cleaners need to be cleaning more, and yous need to be making sure nothing left lying about, and you know, I just felt they were trying to blame other people for these infections.
do you think they were blaming people, or do you think they were just emphasising a need to be careful?
But everybody was being careful anyway because they knew they had to be. It's just sometimes you just felt that they were trying to blame parents for these infections.
And when you say they, who do you have in mind?
The staff on the ward and infection control.
At some point, did you get some sort of letter or a notice of some kind about the water?
Yes, I did.
And can you tell us a wee bit about that?
Just to say, highlighting the concerns it was in the media. I haven't got my letter. I know it's in the house somewhere, but with my moves, I've came across it. Just to kind of, it was giving us information regarding what we already had heard on the media.
Did you find it reassuring?
No,
Why not?
because it wasn't fixing the problem. We were still there in the hospital with this problem ongoing, and people still trying to hide the fact that it was as bad as it was.
Did it explain what the problem was?
I wouldn't say no, right, no.
That maybe takes us on to think about another related matter, communication. And if I just start it this way, Ms Crichton, just looking at matters generally, and I'll direct you to parts of your statement in a minute. How would you assess communication generally while you were in the hospital? By which, when I say communication, I mean communication by the staff with you.
Regarding the water or my son's care?
Just generally, how would you assess the level of communication?
The water, I think, was non-existent. They really didn't tell you much about it, or they made it, they didn't know much about it. Whereas with my son's care, sometimes I felt it was a kind of try to blame each other. You know, if something was missed or wrong, or oh, I wasn't on shift, or I wasn't shift that day, and it was kind of try to pass the buck, or the doctor's not wrote that in the notes, so I don't know what's correct. Just thought, felt like they were all blaming each other.
Can you have a wee look at paragraph 94 of your statements, right at the very end? And you say, I'm okay with communications now. Or, sorry, I'm okay with the communications now. I'll just stop there. What do you mean by that?
Well, I'm not in as much, but anything that I ask now, they're fine. I mean, if anything I need to know about, we're okay back forward. While I was in the hospital, it was horrendous. Everyone was blaming each other.
Yeah.
It wasn't them, or they don't know about that. Or
Okay, so you then go on to say, while I was in the hospital, it was horrendous. Everyone blamed each other, and it wasn't me. I don't know about that.
aye, like if you asked information and something, they went, "Oh, I don't know about that. I'll need to go and find out." You know, when they're
And if we go back to paragraph 76, your statement, I just wanted another wee thing I just wanted to clarify. You got that in front of you?
yes,
I think this is what you've just said. You're indicating the last couple of times I've been in the hospital, they seem to have been okay. Is that right?
yes,
Yeah. I don't know if it was because they were shorter stays, the cracks appear when you're in longer. I think the doctors that I've spoken to were fine. It was the nurses, really. They would always tell you what they need to find out the answers or ask somebody else. And then you say the information in general has been quite good. They go through everything with Kieran and they take their time. Just pausing there, is that you indicating your assessment of things now?
yes, yes.
And then when you go on to say, even in the plaster room, staff in there were wonderful. They talked to him. At what point in time are you referring to there?
That's when he's got his leg done, just out after he's been out the plaster room. Before he get the leg up, they plastered him for 6 weeks previous to that.
Okay, so was that this year then?
Yes,
Thank you. Now, still on the subject of communication, I want to move to communication about a particular matter, and you've already spoken about it to some extent, and it's infection. Are we right in understanding from your statement that Kieran had a few infections when he was when he was in the hospital? Is that right?
Yeah. Did
you feel that on every occasion the nature and the cause of those infections were always explained to you? Did you feel that they were ever explained to you?
Sometimes he would say was one that they'd never heard of, or we're waiting in the things. They didn't really get into detail about the infections that Kieran got. It seemed to be sourced quite a lot.
How would you assess the effectiveness of the communication with you in relation to infection?
Very good.
If we go on then to think about a related topic, preventative medication. To your knowledge, was Kieran on preventative medication while he was in the hospital?
At the time, I thought it was just part of the treatment. I didn't know what it was until after.
What was it that you found out after?
That is, cortisol was preventative. I didn't know that.
Preventative in what sense?
Bacterias and things. I didn't know. I thought that was just part of his cancer treatment.
And how was it you found out that it was preventative, as you describe
it? Just through talking to other parents and WhatsApps and things. You know, that's the only reason I found that out.
Thank you. Now, moving on to another topic, still in relation to communication, but not communication with the hospital or the health board. I want to ask you some questions about communication with the Scottish Government. At some point, did you contact a representative of the Scottish Government?
Yes, I did.
Who was that?
Jane Freeman.
Why did you do that?
Because of the investigation of the kids at the hospital.
And when you say the investigation, is that the case note review that you're referring to?
Yes,
And why in particular did you want to speak to the Scottish Government about that matter?
It's just there was a lot of kids being highlighted, and I had just phoned to ask if Kieran was to be involved in that.
And did you get through to Miss Freeman when you called?
Yes, I did.
And you managed to speak to her?
Yep.
Can you recall what she said?
She just said that all kids who were going to be part of it, even if a child was involved, they weren't going to contact everybody. But said that everybody was going to talk to has already been.
Now, moving on then, I want to just sort of move towards the conclusion of your evidence. And I've got a few things I want to ask you before we finish. How would you describe Kieran's experiences in the hospital and the impact that they have had upon him? Well, do you want to have a look at paragraph 68? Just take a moment to read it and have a think about impacts upon Kieran that you might want to tell us about.
I did say that. I was kind of all over the place because between Kieran in the hospital and having to move house and everything else on top of that, you know, it was quite emotional. I ended up on anxiety medication.
Yeah.
Kieran, he was just scared and unsure and what was happening, you know, but it makes us question everything.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you again. Could you repeat
No, you're
that?
okay. I was just going to make us question everything, you know, you weren't as trusting as you used to be before, and whereas I would never have questioned anything in the hospital before, but now I'm as trusting as I used to be, I'll say.
Well, just thinking then about the impact on you then, what impact have Kieran's experiences or your experiences in the hospital had upon you?
Like I trust now, the NHS.
Yeah.
Sad, really, but
I mean, over the weeks and months of 2018, at any point did you worry about what the issue with the water was, for example?
sorry, can you repeat that?
Over the weeks and months that you were in hospital, were there times when you worried about what the issues were with the water?
Absolutely, yes. I was just worried about what harm my son would come to with them.
Have you got any concerns that you yourself may have had any issues arising from using the water?
Yeah, I ended up, I have bother. I only have one kidney, and I was kind of, my health needs were put to the side for a while when I was dealing with Kieran. When I came out and went to the doctor, routine appointment for bloods in my urine, and I got a phone call to say that, I can't even say it, I don't say it. I ended up with an infection called.
You look at paragraph 51, I think you might already have given us the name of it. Is that there?
Can I see it? That's the thing. Teller, which is connected to water and a bacteria, usually found in water. And my doctor had to actually ask someone else of what kind of antibiotics could use this up because he'd never came across it before. But I ended up with that.
Okay. I just want to move on now, Ms Crichton, and really just ask for your final reflections. And it's really this. How do you feel about the hospital?
I just feel you get quite anxious having to go up there due to building not being fit for purpose. That shouldn't be the case when you're trying to deal with people and make them well.
Now, is there anything further you want to say before we conclude?
Yeah, I've got a wee bit I've wrote down here. That age now. I would like to thank Dr. Emma Campbell and her team, the paediatric neurosurgery, Dr. Dermot Murphy, the paediatric oncology, for saving my son's life. With their expert and professional care, all the doctors and nurses and all the Schahalian staff, I'll be forever grateful. The management above them have put them in a very difficult position. And if anyone who works under policy and procedure and care standards put people's lives at risk, you're held accountable. And the staff at the hospital were put in a difficult situation, as we could maybe refusing to no continue our job, but they never had this choice, as it's cancer and children they're working with. And if they left, the outcome would be unmanageable. So they worked through this difficult, stressful situation due to their passion and professionalism. But the higher management need to be held accountable for this and putting these professionals in this situation in the first place. My opinion.
Thank you, Ms Crichton. My Lord, I have no further questions for Ms Crichton.
Thank you, Ms Crichton. Thank you for giving the inquiry your written statement, and thank you for providing your evidence this afternoon. It'll be all part of quite a large body of evidence that the inquiry will have to consider, but it was useful, so thank you very much. That's the end of your evidence for today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr Duncan, I understand that's the end of the evidence for this part of this diet. Am I right?
That's correct, my Lord.
Right. So we will adjourn today and sit again on Monday the 25th. Monday the 25th of October. So I hope we will see each other again on the 25th. But till then, we're adjourned. Thank you.